Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today for this extremely special program on one of my favorite topics, which is data. I am very excited to hear from our esteemed guests on the how, the why, and the what for on data, and how data and insights are key drivers for our successful cannabis businesses and investments. But before I hand this over to Jake and Allison, I thought I would share some of my own research that I just did on some data. So first of all, what is data? And how do we use it, create it, and consume it? Well, generally speaking, we create data in multiple ways, like social sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. There's probably a few more that I haven't mentioned that got created probably yesterday. We also send 500 billion emails a day. We also produce and consume data with our wearable technologies, our connected cars, and even old school things like radio, TV, and telephones. Did you know that we humans create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day? Yes, folks, I had to look that up too. Quintillion is 18 zeros. Every day, we also, on average, this is a person on average, consumes about 15 and a half hours of data. Last I checked, there are still 24 hours in a day. So I guess we're consuming data while we sleep and or probably in the shower. Although I'd argue that my kids are probably doing more than that. The last interesting data point that I found was that 90% of all of the data that we have right now on the planet was created in just the last 2 years. So I know this all sounds very overwhelming, and this is something we're going to get into today. But the real issue here isn't just how much data we have, but how do we decode this data? How do we create meaningful insights for cannabis investors, consumers, and business owners? Our hosts today do just that. And so it is my pleasure to bring on stage and to introduce themselves and their guests. And to get this party started, please welcome Jake Setlak and Allison Disney of Receptor Brands.
Hello, thank you for having us. I just want to make sure everyone can see. I saw some in the chat that the video wasn't going through. Is everyone okay to proceed? We can see everyone? Thumbs up, we can see. Good. All right, I'm Jake Setlak. I'll be taking you through a presentation momentarily. I do creative strategy at Receptor Brands. That's our cannabis brand consulting and marketing agency. I come to that after 20 years of hard time at big agencies. Allison likes to use my hard time pun, so I got to use it first this time. But I've worked on guilty pleasure brands, vices, McDonald's, Budweiser, back when it was What's Up. A lot of McDonald's, a lot of regulated categories, lots of different categories where they all lend a little something special to cannabis. And it was time to venture outside of big agency land and do something a little more adventurous and a little more interesting to me personally. And here we are at Receptor. So we're bringing some tricks that Allison and I developed for some other big companies. And we've sort of weaponized the thinking and turned it into something we can use for cannabis. So we'll get to more of that in a moment. I'll let Allison jump in.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Jake mentioned, my name is Allison Disney, and I work on the business strategy side at Receptor Brands. I also come from a global marketing and advertising agency background, working a lot on consumer packaged goods here in the Midwest, as well as retail and tech over the pond in the UK. And Jake and I first met back at that agency land, and we're excited to bring all that experience forward for the cannabis category and for the cannabis industry, as well as CBD and ancillary businesses and services. So I'll be joining the conversation a bit later when we hear from our panelists, but I will leave it to Jake to take you through some of our content today.
All right. Thank you. And thank you again to our friends at Arcview and our panelists, Chris and Varuni, who will be joining us after this. Can everyone see a slide that says Decoded, a data-driven guide to customer strategy? Be the name. Sounds good. I'm going to keep going. Okay, excellent. I know I can skip one slide already because we just did the introductions, but here's what we look like in case you didn't see us. I like to start off here on this cartoon from Marketunist to make the point that I imagine we've all experienced something like this as consumers. We've all been consumers longer than we've been brands or marketers. But this is really like when the brand doesn't get it right. So what we see here is, a brand disrupting someone's sleep, waking them up in the middle of the night to ask them if they're having trouble sleeping and give them a coupon for $5 off sleep aid liquid caps. So what's going on here, other than like huge piss off factor in the middle of the night, is a problem with brand alignment. So what brand alignment is about is when the customer's experience of your brand and your service and just sort of everything about you matches up to their expectations of what you should be doing for them and how you should behave and how they understand you in the category that they interact with you. So this would be bad brand alignment here for a sleep aid brand to wake you up in the middle of the night. Seems like the opposite of what that brand is supposed to be delivering in terms of the ultimate sort of experience. So we don't want to do this. We don't want to be that brand that wakes someone up in the middle of the night to ask if they're having trouble sleeping, because they're not going to voluntarily come back to us. So what we really want to do is figure out how to guide ourselves to a better understanding of that customer, so we can, as a brand, match the expectations that they have. And the way we do that is by understanding what they want and what their motivations are and how those motivations change when they're in different phases of their sort of journey in the category, whether they know what they want or they don't know what they want, they're doing their homework, or they have had an experience that they want to tell other people about, good or bad. So why is all that data important? How does it help us understand them better? Well, we're going to go over 5 key questions that we boil things down to. There are lots of other questions we'll ask ourselves when we get down in the weeds, but basically what you want to know to have an understanding of your customer are: who are they? Why are they motivated to do what they do? Where do they spend their time and money? What opportunity or problem can your brand solve? And then when are those people most receptive to what you have to say and do for them? So here's the point where you may see a poll pop up if you're on the other end of this webinar. What we like to start by, as we go through those questions, before we go through them, what data do you already have to help with your discovery? So there are a couple different types of data. We'll talk about some in a worksheet we have to share after today's presentation, but think about them by source. So there's first-party data, that's data you collect directly. So that's site traffic, social media engagement, member surveys, things where the data is coming right to you and you see all of it. Secondary is someone else's first-party data that you're accessing directly. So this could be ad campaign performance data or menu plugin transactions. And then there's third party, which is data you purchase from an outside source. And this could be panel data, purchase data, trend reports. And that's some of the type of data we'll be looking in the examples that we have in this deck here. All right, I hope you're all taking the poll. I'm curious to see if we have how much data we've collected as an audience, if we're not shy about answering that. It's sort of a trick question because you probably feel like you don't have enough, even if you have a lot, or you're not sure what to do with it. So how do you make sense of the data you're collecting? What do you do with all this stuff? There's sort of the misnomer of big data is that, like, there's all this data, it must mean something, so let's collect it all and save it all. Well, it's really the sense you make of the data and the way you interrogate the data you have that helps you really get develop some insights and understanding out of that data. Okay, I'm going to move on. Actually, do we have poll results?
Yes, we could share the results. Let's close the polling now, and let's see what everyone said.
Some. That's fair. That's fair. No one feels like they have a lot. I mean, a few of you feel like you have a lot, but maybe you're shy about saying that, I'm guessing. I'm going to interpret a little bit here, but maybe you feel like you have more than you know what to do with, or you're not sure how to use what you have. Hopefully we're going to help shed a little light on that with the rest of this presentation. So let's get back to those 5 questions here. As soon as I get my cursor back onto my presentation. That first question we want to ask is, who are they? Here's a typical customer profile. You know their gender, their age, where they live, or their zip code or their state, roughly some geography. And then you have a category that they're in. So we looked at adult recreational cannabis users. And to be fair, especially if we have real data fans in the audience today, this is less of a target and more of a range. 21 plus is sort of the population of regulated adult recreational cannabis users, and if we're looking at females, that's sort of almost a population. I would think to get more understanding about a customer, you narrow down to target segments. So it might be 21 to 34 or 21 to 54. But for the purposes of today's demonstration, we're going to see sort of a broader range here, so we can see sort of how some of this third-party data shakes out. So we didn't look at a ton of sources. We tried to make this an accessible example, something that's not going to require years of research before you can start getting some insights. This is stuff that's relatively off the shelf, subscription-based type of stuff. And we'll be looking at a little bit of it as we go along here. So you get, there's general sort of descriptive data of someone, this sort of basic, demographic information. A better customer profile comes with a little more information. Do we know relationship status? Well, we do for this example we'll be talking about. She's single. What are the top social platforms this population or this target uses? And you'd be surprised how these things shift over time and across platforms or activities too. But what we see for our example audience today is Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Pinterest. The grayed out buttons here, or bullets here rather, are grayed out just because we won't be talking about them today, but these are other examples of the type of data you would get in more descriptive data in profiling the basic description of your customer. So you might also get household income, level of education, profession, are they a veterinarian, a teacher? We saw some nurses assistants in here, but we weren't really focused on that for the example. But you can see, if I only know like where you live and how old you are and what gender you identify as and that you use marijuana, that doesn't tell me a lot about like what's entertaining to you, what copy is going to get through to you, or what really piques your interest, or what type of content are you looking at where I could intercept you with a message at the right time and not wake you up in the middle of the night to ask if you have trouble sleeping. So moving on to our second question of the 5 here. So that was some who are they. Now we move on to why are they motivated to do what they do? We looked at this target for how she's spending her time during COVID, right? Let's not make this super hypothetical. Let's talk about it as if we were doing this for real right now. So we saw her sort of top me time activities and favorite topics that were primarily engaged via her phone and through social media. Were what you see here in the chart on the left. So there's some general areas that are rising to the top with this target. Relationships, arts and crafts, gardening, music, cooking, and then beauty. And beauty is pink because we're gonna look not because I'm trying to be typical, beauty is for girls and it's pink, but because we're gonna drill into that a little bit more on the next page. But there are, even though we see cooking, music, gardening, here's where, and arts and crafts, interrogating the data, making sure you understand what you're looking at here, is sort of the point we're making in the circle on the right here. So while everyone might seem a little more crafty during the pandemic, we're sort of stuck at home trying to entertain ourselves, maybe trying a few hobbies we might not have otherwise. But there are a lot of at-home things that this target does not do. She's not really into exercise that much. She's not into fine arts, so she's not like painting or writing a screenplay or into interpretive dance. And she's not much of a gamer either. That sort of competitiveness takes place in other ways, in sort of beauty products, sampling, demonstrations, cooking new recipes and making them turn out picture perfect. knowing the right playlists to listen to. She's not writing a song, but she's listening to the latest stuff. So let's go a little bit, that's what she's spending her time on, but let's go a little bit deeper on that category that's rising to the top there, beauty. And we're going to jump into another one of the 5 key questions as we do this, and that's, where do they spend their time and money? She prefers to spend time and money in the beauty category. That's why it's rising to the top of her interests there. And through this third-party data, we're able to look at the types of beauty products she's purchased most in the last 12 months, is what you see on the left here. And also the retailers that she's visited most in the last 3 months. And these are, there's a sort of weak attempt to size them by their priority. So she's on Amazon a lot. There's probably always an Amazon Prime shipment in the air or in transit to her. She probably picks up a lip gloss every time she goes to Walgreens, but when she feels like treating herself, she's going to hit Sephora or go to the MAC counter at Macy's. When we can go out and actually visit stores, that is. She's checking them out online and certainly following them on social right now. But if you look at the products she's looking at too, they're all, how do I say this? Camera-ready products. They're from sort of the chest pocket up. So makeup, facial cleansing, facial care, skincare, hairstyling. Her behavior, the data she's leaving behind, the trail of behavior she's leaving in the form of data, is sort of confirming what we know ourselves, because we're all dealing with this COVID situation right now, is that we have to be, whether we want to or not, any meeting I'm in, like this one right now, I have to be somewhat camera ready. But you guys don't know that I'm wearing sweatpants or not right now. So she's not looking at, there's nothing here about varicose veins, but there's a lot of stuff to keep her camera ready. We know that if she's into beauty and her situation sort of calls for her to be more, socialization happens through these virtual means now. Well, this kind of works out for her, right? Beauty's her creative outlet. And the new challenges that she's got because of COVID and because we're all interfacing through Zoom calls like this one now, socializing is only done virtually, and that pressure to be camera ready adds to some social anxiety she already has, but it's something she knows how to do. So now more than ever, she's driven to be a master cosmoholic, Allison's term. That was foreign to me. But, so beauty is an important topic. It's a big topic for her because it sort of covers what she's into anyway, but also what she finds herself needing to be a little better at with the current cultural situation that we're in. And again, if you remember, she's single. So that sex and relationships part there, like she's still, keeping her options open, not just looking good for her followers on the gram, as it were. But we're starting to get a feel for who she is here, and not just female over 21 in Illinois. I'm going to go back to those 5 key questions and keep moving on now. So we move on to what opportunity or problem can the brand solve? What's the data telling us there? Well, we looked at a lot of the social posts that come up for this target. And again, I say target, but it's more of a population. And if you think about, of all the people over 21, who are most likely to be posting a higher volume of social content? The younger ones. So these skew a little younger because that's where the volume is. And that, again, is about interrogating the data and just being honest about what you're looking at and what it actually means versus what you might want to read into it. What we're seeing here in this word cloud, these are the sort of popular, the hashtags that are rising to the top when we look at the sort of volume of social activity. And what we see here is anxiety and health accompany the high volume cannabis topics in social media. So we see cannabis and CBD, and we also see anxiety and depression and health. So these are we don't think it's coincidence. We think these are sort of side by side in conversation. These are sort of naturally fitting together in her life and in her conversation and in the way she's expressing herself online. When we look a little bit deeper, we go to a verbatim level. We go look at the actual post. That word cloud came from a lot of different posts in aggregate, but we can go in and look at a few distinct ones to get a little better picture there. Think of it like if you're using Google Maps and you're zoomed out looking at where the states are, you don't really know turn by turn directions. You need to zoom in and get closer to the street level, as it were, to really know where you're going and get a feel for where you are. And that's the parallel to sort of going down to the post level here when you're looking at social media data. So I don't want to read these to you or spend too much time on them here, but you can see loud and clear that cannabis use and anxiety are right out there. There's no shyness about it, and it's sort of the thing to do is talk about your if you have weaknesses or things that you're going through, and then the things that you do to cope and to get through and to keep going with the life that you want to live. So there's there's a lot going on here with on this post on the left. We see that cigarette and coffee combos, so 1980s. Welcome to 2020s, where cannabis and plant matcha lattes rule. So there's a little bit of commentary that this is part of everyday life, or at least this is the everyday life that they want to portray to their followers on Instagram. And whether they actually do that or just want to portray that, that tells us about their mindset. And that helps us understand what they're going to be receptive to as people who we would have a marketing message for. I believe that's all. Sorry, I get caught reading these posts, even though I say I'm not going to read them to you. We also look at how she meets her needs today. So she's sort of openly talking about her depression and anxiety and cannabis use, and sort of inviting her followers and her social community to sort of talk through it with her and share their problems and their things that they go through and their remedies and their coping mechanisms as well. But when we look a little bit at some of her other behaviors and how these chart across this population of 21 plus female cannabis users, there's a perception of her own health that is sort of driving this self-medication and retail therapy on top of prescriptions she's already getting for depression or anxiety. And just going from left to right across the slide here, if she's not considering herself totally healthy, she might not have the most confidence in just those prescriptions she's gotten for anxiety or depression, or they might not do the job she expects them to. So she's trying to finish the job with other things. And going shopping to let off steam is one of them. And as we saw earlier, going shopping for beauty products is high in the range of things she will go shopping for to let off some steam and just kind of unwind and, just kind of zone out. I don't know if everyone knows this or not. Here's a data point for you. It's a couple years old, so it might be more now, but people on average scroll with their thumb through 300 feet of Instagram and Facebook every day. So that's where she's cruising, looking for the new things to try and buy. Here behind with the cannabis leaf behind them, these three circles here show she's using cannabis, and she's admitting to the survey that she's using cannabis as well, by herself several times a day, using it at home several times a day. Frankly, I would expect these index numbers, the 678, 687, 683, I'd expect them to be a little higher, because we tried to grab a segment of people who identify as cannabis users. Now, this is the use several times a day crowd, so maybe those numbers shouldn't be that high, but the way I read this is there's still a little bit of stigma around everyday use. It's not necessarily a regular regimen, but it might be a go-to when things aren't sort of going the way we want them to all the time. Part of that sort of letting off steam and getting through the day. Interestingly, she smokes cigarettes too. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that in a sort of disgusted way. She smokes cigarettes as well. So it's not just cannabis, but those sort of methods of pacification, the sort of 7 minutes outside to just take a breather. And I used to smoke, and we used to joke that The smokers are the ones who get all the fresh air because they're going outside all the time. But those are those breaks to sort of pause and reflect and regroup during the day that she's used to taking. They're sort of built into her life because she is sort of not getting what she needs from those prescriptions and isn't really confident in a straight Western medicine. And she's sort of taking her well-being into her own hands from what we're seeing in the data here. So what we do when we start looking through all this data and answering these questions, we try to put together a persona so we understand this person sort of at a glance. And we can tell, this is a phrase I personally don't use very much, but she's trying to live her best life. She's living her best life out there. She's trying to feel good about herself. She's trying to look good because she wants to be presentable and has to be camera ready because of this current social situation, but also because beauty is her jam and she is into it. And the ultimate goal, going back to the, like, we're stuck alone and she's single, you want to be well received. Like you want to fit in. You want to fit in with the other people in the cannabis community online, and sort of her social followers and the other sort of cohort interests that they have as well. So we put together a little narrative that is based on the data, but we try to make a little sense of it and add some narrative to it so that we understand her more as a person and not just data points. And so now we have someone who we can think about this person. What time of night is she going to be sleeping? So we don't want to text her past then or during that time to ask her if she's having sleep problems, to go back to that cartoon at the beginning. When we have that persona, we've sort of started to learn some problems that the brand can solve. But so when and where are they most receptive? Now, so we understand this person, but what do we do? How do we know when not to text her or when to say what message to her? Well, we want to be able to capture feedback at critical points along her journey through the category, whether she's shopping for a new brand, she's just going to the dispensary for a routine, like stock up, like I'm out of this, so I'm going to get more of it. I'm not looking for a different brand. I just want my usual thing. Or she's looking at reviews and ratings, trying to broaden her horizons and maybe try something new, or maybe there's a product she usually gets that isn't available. So she's sort of forced to shop and find a substitute. But if we want to get that feedback part right, we really need to understand the critical points in that journey she's taking through the category. And that's where we take that data and once we've made some sense of it in a persona, we go map it against the journey that customer is taking through the category. And just to be fair, no two journeys are necessarily the same. And you would exhaust yourself pretty quickly if you tried to map every single moment that someone thought about the cannabis category and then maybe got distracted and went to something else, or now they're thinking about what they want to watch on Netflix. So there's mental distance between these moments they have in the category, but we try to collect them and group them into buckets so we can understand them at least at a high level. I guess that's a cannabis pun intended. But we really want to map our marketing efforts to those critical stages of her journey in the category. And that's what we base our customer journey model on. And those 5 sort of steps or phases of the journey are pretty typical of most customer journeys. They're the basic steps people take when they are going from being aware of a product to buying it, experiencing it, and advocating for it. And that advocacy could be plus or minus in terms of sentiment. You know, the people with a complaint sometimes are more likely to comment than people who had a good time, good experience. They're not motivated to say something because they're just going on their way. They had a good time and they're moving on. But when we take that data and that understanding of the persona and we start mapping it across the journey here, those 5 categories, it starts to look like a crossword puzzle that you're building, but in the end, it becomes a touchstone almost that Allison and I have used this when we developed it for clients before. You fill this out and it's a little labor intensive up front, but you come back to this, you may find that there's a business opportunity that if you can generate more positive advocacy of your product all the way over in the rightmost column, you will help your awareness and consideration, because more of your target's friends will see that she's saying good things about you, and they'll consider trying you. And they're more likely to take their friend's word than they are word of an advertisement. So just to explain what we do with this map here a little bit as I finish up this section and we move into the panel part. We look at, so across these columns of the journey, these sort of stages of the journey, we look at what are the audience's mindset or goals. So what are their motivations during moments of the journey that fit into each of these columns. We also look at the pain points, right? So not just what they're looking for, but what's preventing them from getting to it. So what are the pain points that prevent them from advancing in their journey, right? They're trying to get to a good experience or a cheaper purchase or a brand that they want to tell their friends about. How can we get them to that better? How can we make that more of a frictionless path for them? And when we do that, that's where we put in this desired action or response row. What do we want them to think, feel, or do differently during this stage of their journey? And then we know as a brand, what's the objective of our engagement or communication during this stage, knowing how we want them to respond based on the pain points that they're facing in the mindset that they're in during that part of their journey. And then we look at the touch points. Okay, where's that going to happen? What are the relevant touch points that best help us achieve our objectives? Should we text her in the middle of the night, or should we have a banner that's next to the weather forecast she checks every morning when she's getting ready? And then finally, just rounding out the map here at the lowest row here, we map out what our main message should be for each of these sort of columns of the journey here. What's the singular idea to convey during this journey stage? Those of you who are seasoned marketers will know sometimes you have a lot of reasons to believe, a lot of points you want to get across, and they just don't all fit in every execution. And frankly, they're not all appropriate at every point you have to engage your customer. So this is where we get judicious, we make decisions, and we make sure all the messages are accounted for, but they aren't all forced to be conveyed in one moment of the journey versus the more appropriate moments of the journey when that target person is going to be more receptive to them. So back to the point of that cartoon at the beginning, this is how we look at the data and do the math and make sure we aren't that brand that's waking people up in the middle of the night to ask if they're having trouble sleeping. What you saw on our way to this section of the presentation was a couple of the tools in our toolbox at Receptor Brands. We looked at that customer persona, and that's really how we breathe life into your strategy with deeper data-driven understanding of your target customer. And then we go map it along the journey that they're taking through categories. So we want to make sure you can connect with them when they're most receptive. And learning the right time, right place, and right message really does involve sort of laying it all out and figuring out what needs to work where and when. And this is just my closing slide of this section of the presentation. Thank you all for hanging out with me this far, and we are about to transition into the panel portion of it. This is really just some cell language here. If you like what you saw here, you want a little bit of this magic working for you, email us. Let us put our heads together and see what we can do. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to my co-host here, Allison.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks for sharing that analysis with us and just the overview of how we approach things over here at Receptor Brands. I am going to welcome a couple of our special guests that are going to help continue this discussion about data-driven customer strategy. But before I do, I'd just like to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into that little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can at the very end of the panel conversation we're about to have. So now I'd like to introduce our fantastic panelists. Varuni Palacios, Head of Growth at Miss Grass, as well as Chris Rivera, SVP of Retail Marketing and Customer Experience at Cresco Labs. So thank you both for joining us today. Do we have everyone? We do. Hi, everyone. If you could both start by just sharing a little bit more about your respective companies and the importance of customer understanding to your businesses. Chris, do we want to start with you?
For sure. Well, a little about us. Been at Cresco Labs for about 2 years now. As many of you may know, we're one of the largest MSOs or multi-state operators in the cannabis space, operating in over nine states today. I specifically run our retail operation, marketing, store development, and operations for Sunnyside Dispensary. To your question, Allison, like customers, like at the core of what we do, understanding and building the profile that Jake just walked us through, it's critically important. It is actually the roadmap to every strategic decision you make. So as we thought through developing Sunnyside, which launched in 2020, January 1st in Illinois, a lot of work was done to understand need states, demos, where they lived, interests, fears. All of that built personas that allowed us to make decisions on our retail brand name, our store experience, pricing, assortment, everything in between. And it is the kind of the thing we always fall back on. How will our customer, our shopper, take to certain change we're doing operationally or experiential wise? It's at the focus of what we do every day, talking about that shopper and who he or she is.
Great. Varuni, how about you?
Yeah, exactly what Chris said. I'm Varuni, by the way. Hi, I'm head of growth at Miss Grass. For those of you who don't know Miss Grass, we're the largest women's owned community brand in cannabis, and we exist to help the world, starting with women, get good at weed. I've been with Miss Grass now 57 years, but really 2 also. And it has been an incredibly interesting and fast changing experience along the way. One of the first things that I did when I joined was start to collect all of the different data from the different touch points that we owned and combine them to see what sort of profile we could build on our customer, who she is, what her preferences are, where the gaps in her education and understanding of cannabis was, which either led to stigma and her lack of ability to engage with us, or how much she was open and willing to communicate and share her love for us or love for the plant with the people in her community. And we are community first. We collect first party data, both quantitative and qualitative, at every single touch point, whether it's from our site, what they're doing, when they're coming, what pages they're visiting, from our online marketplace, which we sell federally legal hemp-derived cannabis across various need states and ship across all 50 states. So we can understand where she lives, how often she's buying, what she's buying, and as well as social and email, which we're kind of known for our email. And if you don't get it, you should. But that has really just helped us sort of continuously learn who she is, where she lives, what she's interested in, what she's buying. And we've also used that data to inform our product development, which we launched in Q4 of 2021. Our customer is the number one most important and greatest source of data creation to inform decision making across all channels for what we do.
Thank you for that. And I can endorse the Miss Grass emails. They do a great job of taking very stigmatized, taboo topics sometimes and getting you to click on that subject line. So congratulations on how you've applied that data to your marketing strategy. I guess, do you feel like, Varuni, in particular, since Miss Grass focuses on the female user in the category, does that help you provide additional depth when it comes to looking at data? Do you feel like that focus creates any sort of advantage for your business, or do you feel like you still need to kind of take that broad strokes look to identify the relevant trends and insights for your business?
Yeah, I mean, so we, more than a specific demographic, cater to a psychographic, and that psychographic is conscious consumers. Because right now, when you look at the people or the most frequent buyers in cannabis using like third-party data, like what Headset offers, you can see that the industry and the majority of people who are buying are primarily male. And so our goal in entering the industry and building a platform and a brand for anyone to shop is one based on in conscious consumerism, which means, and because women are the largest growing demo in cannabis right now, women and most new cannabis consumers they need to know more than beyond strains. They need to know more than sativa indica hybrid. They need to know what's in it, where it's come from, how much it's going to cost, why is it this price, what are the values of your brand, why would I choose you over someone else, how do I discern what I want versus what a bud tender recommends for me in a dispensary, which may be biased based on their own experiences and preferences. We tend to pull best practices from some of the D2C brands outside of the industry, looking to brands like Glossier as an example, and pull in our own expertise that we've built from listening to our communities, as well as using our first party data, qual and quan, as well as third party data to make those decisions. And yes, women are the largest growing demo in cannabis, and yes, we are the biggest, community for weed loving women. We ultimately have a bigger goal and responsibility, which is to help the world get good at weed. So we distribute education, measure, and collect the data from how that education is consumed, and then use it to create a better offering and experience around what you can buy, where, and when, so that people ultimately are conscious consumers and vote with their dollars and find and gravitate towards brands that they feel most aligned with what they're looking for, both from a value and need state perspective.
Bruni, you just mentioned some third-party data, but also marketing measurement. I'd love to hear from both of you sort of how you use first-party, secondary, or third-party data differently, or sort of what are the objectives when you decide to go survey your immediate audience versus maybe look for an outside partner to help supplement some of your understanding.
Chris, tell us, and then I'll go.
Perfect. Well, it's a loaded question. I think data is an ecosystem. It all works together. So at times we lean on a source of data more. We lean on it heavier because of what it can do. So in the case of Sunnyside, we use a lot of first party data to inform us about our shopper. So we're collecting data points all the time on how often they shop, what they buy, how often and receptive they are to promotions, what time of day they shop, how many stores they shop at. Like there are all these data points we're collecting. So oftentimes when we're looking to understand where incremental revenue could lie for the given month, we'll look at our first party data and it really informs you where to drill to get oil. Because instead of doing a mass promotion, you can actually get a little more focus because you have the data on the first party, right, with your customers to actually create something that's a little more special and unique that's going to drive the action you want. Conversely, we're kind of new to adult use. We launched in 2020. So oftentimes we use a lot of third-party data to inform just our marketing calendar. We look at states like Colorado, California, Washington, states that have been recreational for some time, to understand what are the occasions, moments that matter to shoppers that can inform our marketing calendar. So it's kind of a combination of looking at your first party data of what people are doing today and looking at your third party to kind of inform what the future could look like for you. So it's an interesting kind of ecosystem that's always playing at any given time. Yeah, that's what I would say about how we use those two differently today than what I've been able to use as a wholesaler in my past.
Yeah, I mean, we take a similar approach. I would say we try to organize our data into data around commerce, data around community, and data around our content. And from there, we assess. So for example, what we've kind of come up with is a funnel for our customer experience. So how do we create and distribute our content that grows community and then brings them into the world of Miss Grass? And then how do we create that experience where if it's like, for example, different marketing tactics that drive brand awareness and ultimately via social, via partnerships, via influencers or whatever, drive back to our site, which we've created as a destination for learning and education via content. Or if you live outside of California, which is where we currently distribute THC, how you can still buy Miss Grass through CBD or our merch offerings. We're able to collect first-party data from that e-com experience. And then if you live in California, we get you even deeper into the funnel, which is tell us where you are, sign up for our email, give us your your zip code, and then we funnel you to shops that are within your area for either delivery or retail store shopping. I would also say it's not 100% because right now I think data in THC specifically is really, really messy, meaning like there are a lot of players and there are gaps in passing data to all of those players. So we're a brand. We distribute our products in retailers and there's like so there's like production, manufacturing, delivery, retail, and then brand. And we have, for example, we'll get order data but then we won't get like retail sell-through data. So we're only seeing a portion of the journey versus the entire cycle. And so we've tried to bridge that gap with community data, content data, e-com data, building partnerships with our THC retailers so that, we're partnering on initiatives where it's mutually beneficial to share that performance data back and forth, as well as with third-party data sources like Headset, for example, who are constantly surveying the biggest sample size of the industry and the population shopping within the industry to fill in some of those gaps where possible. It's not perfect, but we're working hard for it to be.
Yeah, Varuna, you just, mentioned, obviously it's partly the life stage of the category and the life stage of the operators in the category, right? But I think we've had the same observation, sort of the stability of the data, whether it's, the depth or the longitudinal look at the data. It's still evolving in the space. It's hard to find, I think, some of those consistent, very stable sources. But if the last year didn't accelerate, our ability to connect with people and find more data points and build on that digital footprint that we've talked about already today, that perhaps a silver lining. So, any predictions from either of you in terms of where you think data is going in the category, or how it will change how we operate in cannabis or CBD in the next year?
Well, I'll go or Chris, jump in if you.
No, please.
So I actually think that retailers are getting really, really, like they're working on solutions that package and deliver data to the brands. And I have the brand's perspective who want them. And essentially like selling us our data back to us at a premium. So if you want this data in exchange, we'll run media, or you can buy it as a software solution where we'll plug you into a database. Especially, it's like what we've examined is more of like a Sephora model. So you go in and you're either like a tier 1, 2, or 3 brand, and based on what tier you're in with those retailers is the amount of data that you have. And if you want access to data, you either got to become a tier 1 brand or you got to pay for the access. And so, at Miss Grass, we think we're clever and smart and quick too. So we're always coming up with ways to counter those and work around them and with them. But I think that the industry is very, very, very aware that there's a major gap in data to inform product development, partnerships, reaching the customer where they are. But I think that there are just really big gaps in the overall supply chain from development to retail that need to be solved for first. In addition, I think that there's a huge movement right now for brands to bypass the retailers and become D2C, which is, I mentioned Glossier, and if we're looking outside of the industry, is a brand where that CEO, Emily Weiss, said very clearly and vocally, like, my brand will never be offered in Sephora. I'm fine with my most valuable 40,000 customers who drive this much revenue on a monthly basis, and I'm going to go after people like them versus selling myself out to the retailers. So, we'll see. I don't know about you guys, but every 3 months since working in cannabis, we've been playing a different ball game here. So we're just trying our best to stay 2 steps ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's some great points. And as the retailer in a limited access market today, we just established Illinois as a rec market in 2000. We're still just trying to stabilize the supply chain. So getting consistent product delivered from wholesalers is a real need. We're one of the more sophisticated retailers taking our data, but at the current stage, and I think you're absolutely right in your current hypothesis that access to data and how much we'll share will change over time. But as we currently sit, we're using the data to help inform wholesalers, our partners, what we need from them, because ultimately it's impacting our business and ability to drive revenue at the current moment. But I do see there's going to be a little bit of a reckoning between what retailers will share as they become large operators. So, today, no one has more than 100 stores at the MSO level. About 100, I think, is the max. But as those continue to grow, they're going to have the power that other retailers like Walmart or Target, and they will use their power of the information they have and the connection they have with their shopper to influence production, pricing, innovation. All of that will come, and you have a lot of really smart people from other CPG and retailers coming in that know how this game is played. So they're going to quickly move to that place pretty quickly. So for those that are wholesalers and you talk to your retailers, it's understanding the value you can bring and being focused on understanding your shopper or your consumer that buys your brand, the value you add to the retailer, and understanding and just what Jake went through, that profile of understanding your consumer to the T and how that consumer makes sense to come to that retail. Like, it may be that I, as a retailer, looking for more boomers that are trying to switch from prescriptions, and your brand talks to that. Well, coming and being a tier 1 customer that brings insights, brings value, brings programming, brings, of course, hopefully some price advantage to the table helps bridge that gap so that you don't find yourself kind of locked out at the end of the day as a tier 3 wholesaler that isn't getting access to the shelves that you're looking to be on.
Absolutely. Just you touched on sort of how data is going to create a more competitive marketplace in the future. But for those in our audience who are watching and maybe responded to the poll with some data experience or maybe no data experience, from both of your perspectives, what are some of the challenges of collecting usable data and how you apply it? What are some of the watch outs or the lessons learned that you would share with people who are just trying to sort of level up on their data collection and application?
I would say first, don't collect data just for the sake of it. Sit and think about what questions you're trying to answer and back into the metrics and KPIs that you need to collect to answer those questions. Data for data's sake can be just as ineffective as having no data at all. And I would say, it's really most important when you're extremely clear about what you're trying to solve for. And you can discover some blind spots along the way, which is really nice. I'd also say, user privacy is incredibly important. So making sure that you have, the right frameworks to hold that data and analyze it and share or not share it out. And Well, Chris, what do you think?
No, am I unmuted? I always do that.
Nope.
No, privacy is a big concern.
Privacy.
I'm collecting so many data points, but if I don't have one's permission to have a one-to-one conversation with them, specifically when it comes to email, text messaging, all the things that I would like to do in real time, because I'm collecting, I know how often you come, I know what you typically buy, I know when you shop, and I can use all of that to influence or hopefully motivate you. But if I don't have permission to message you, I can get into litany of problems. So that's an unlock for how to actually use your data. I do agree with you that data can also be crippling. Knowing what, it goes back to Jake's presentation, the who, what, why, when, just understanding what your strategy is and then looking at the data that's going to inform. I think the other thing I would say about just collecting data, it's an art and science. So hopefully you know what strategically you're trying to do. You collect the things that are pertinent, but then when you go out in the world, assuming you don't have privacy issues, your message can fall flat. It's all about how the message is received, when it's received, how it's received, where it's received. So just because you have a strategy and you have the data, you can fall flat on like the last leg of the journey, which is, did I have a message that compelled you to hopefully answer what my strategy was trying to get you to do? So it's not just data for data's sake, but there is a lot of finesse, kind of a art to it all, and getting consumers motivated and engaged to do what you want them to do.
Jake, you're hearing our panelists refer back to your presentation a little bit. I want to give you a chance to comment maybe on that last bit around the art and the science, and how you take these different data points and can convert it into application.
I think it's exactly art and science. There's science that it's data, but there's art in interpreting it and making sense of it. And understanding if it's data you should be spending that much of your time and resources on too. It's hard to give like a big bulk example. Okay, let's say if you were trying to determine an influencer partner and you only looked at number of followers, well, that's a data point and it's really easy to read it and compare it from one to another. But if you don't interrogate that data, you might not know that those followers could all be bots that were purchased for, $20, $60. They might not be actual followers that will deliver the reach and the impressions and the engagement that you're trying to get from this influencer. So I think understanding the science of the data, what's statistically significant, what data has integrity to it, what data is leaky. Does this set really match up to this set, or do we just kind of want it to? You have to know when to turn off your wishful thinking, but then when you get into the interpretation, we have to figure out how to know this person. How do you understand this person? And there's some art to that. There are always going to be blanks to fill in, and you're never necessarily going to nail it down perfectly and know this person inside and out, but you'll know them well enough to get through to them, to Chris's point, to get that opt-in so you could talk to them more, or that you get them on the Miss Grass email list. And that's your line into them. And then you can grow and try other engagement techniques from there. You can if you have them on your email, then you can send them a poll and you can learn more about them that way. So I think there's an art to how you think about learning more data on top of what you have when you start to identify the people who you really want to know better and get a deeper understanding of.
Great. Thanks, Jake. Well, I think we are starting to run a little close on time, so I'll do one last question speed round for all of our panelists. If there was one measurable thing about your customer that you don't know, that you would love to know, what would it be?
Can we have three? Does it have to be just one?
One? I'm like, well, everything.
Well, okay, I'll just rattle off. We don't follow rules, so I'll just give you my wish list. And if anyone has an answer to my wish list, fulfill my wishes, please. One is, what other brands in cannabis the Miss Grass shopper is into? What brands outside of cannabis our customer has affinities with? We do collect a lot of information, like where she would want Miss Grass minis outside of the state of California. But I think it's more around just like brand affinities and, like product category usage is where our head's at right now. It's sort of anonymizing the qualitative data and insights that paint the picture of who our core to more customer is beyond just the quantifiable stuff that we can get.
And I'll say this. We believe the penetration of current users in the marketplace, 21 plus, 10 to 15%. I'm actually more curious about learning about this large can of curious. So the folks that it's in their head, they think there could be a need state or an occasion for it, but there's some stigma, there's some hindrance. I really, really, really need to deeply understand using data, primary, secondary, whatever I can get my hands on, so that I can inform how to grow the category. Because all cannabis is an emerging industry, which is fantastic. It has a great loyal base now, and it will continue to grow as black market falls and people move into just established retail. But there are these folks that have never actually experienced cannabis, and we could learn a lot from them, so that we can motivate them to come into stores or try products. And that's still a place that we're digging hard to get some insights around. I know the generic stuff. I want
on a
deep.
survey.
I love it. I love it.
We should do a study or a survey together.
I'm all in.
I like it. Great outcome of this conversation. More ideas to collect more data. Let's go do it. All right. I know we're very close on time. I think there might be a few audience questions we can take just before we close.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. This is Louis Han here, one of the VPs here at the Arcview Group. Really enjoyed the conversation. I love data myself, but I'm not experts like you guys who live and breathe it day to day. I definitely learned a thing or two. But we do have questions from the audience. Unfortunately, if I didn't get to your question, I apologize. There's just so many questions in such little time. But we'll have a way for you to connect with some of the panelists if you wanted to follow up with your conversation here. But let's get to some of the questions here. There's some interesting ones. Varuni and Chris, here's the first one. Kyle from the audience is asking. He says, I don't yet rely on this sort of data in making business decisions. What are the first steps in changing that? We talked about some of the watch-outs when first collecting data, when you take that first step, like how we shouldn't collect data for data's sake, for example, to Varuni's earlier point. But I think this is more of a cultural question. And Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong. How do you make that transition as a leader in your business to motivate your team to be more data-oriented? Do you have any thoughts around that?
The first thing that I would say is, how clear are you on what data sources you even have today? Make a list of the key questions that you would, want to answer, or where you believe your blind spots are, and then get really clear about, of the platforms or channels that you use, start digging and looking at what data they offer. You'll find yourself in a really great starting place, and then you can just sort of build from there. An even better position if you're able to take data, for example, from Google Analytics or your email service provider platform and your point of sale, and layer them on top of each other to see where consistencies from top to bottom are. I saw someone asked, where do we hold all of that data? We've built something proprietary, but there are a lot of data visualization platforms. And, one that you could start off with that's free is Google's Data Studio.
Very cool. Chris?
She so eloquently answered. It's how do you build on that? But it's true. It goes back to, what are your business objectives? What's your strategy? Looking at your data sources and finding out where the gaps are. And I think with the right exploration around what data sources you're missing and what questions you have, start showing the team how a little digging, a little why can lead to a very refined strategy that hopefully a tactic or some execution will come of it, that the results will start to change. You were seeing X number of sales, now you're seeing 10% more. It's those little small wins, once you've fully identified where you currently sit on data sources and strategic questions, that allows you to move your organization from not a data first to a data first one.
I'll just add that, sometimes it could just be the way that's communicated. At least at a previous firm that I worked for, there was this one employee who was just so set in their ways that they really didn't want to engage with the sort of database culture that we're trying to build. But really, all it took was a couple of articles and a TED talk from a YouTube video, just sharing that around that talked on the same topic, and that really motivated and inspired this person to look at data in a new light. So lots of different approaches there. I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question, Kyle. Awesome. So next question is for Jake and Allison. Mary from our group is asking, what are some of the best ways to learn deeper details about customers outside of just basic demographic details that you can learn from platforms, like what other interests that they have, consumer behavior, etc.?
Jake, I'll let you go ahead.
Well, I'll jump in. I'll cite two of the sources we used for the presentation. One was YouGov, which is a survey-based pool of data, and Social Bakers, which is a social listening tool. We used them in conjunction with each other. We probably used YouGov to sort of get the ballpark we were looking for, and then Social Bakers to go a little deeper on it. There are a variety of alternatives to those sources as well, but you generally try to make the world a little smaller before you start digging deeper in any one place. Allison, do you have anything to add to that? I mean,
Yeah, no, just to build on that, I think two of the resources you mentioned that we look to often, neither one of those are necessarily cannabis specific. So YouGov does include cannabis data in their survey data now, and they have quite a recent survey methodology. So that data is getting updated all the time. But I think sometimes looking outside of cannabis, when you're looking at that affinity and interest, for those affinity and interests or different places to engage them, if you can proxy your customer into those data sets or help find, a lookalike in some of those data sets, then you start to see, okay, outside of their engagement with the category, what else are they doing? Who are they doing it? Where else are there where maybe cannabis or CBD or your service can help enhance their experience?
Awesome. Thank you, Jake and Allison. This one just came in. I think this will be the second to last question that we'll ask. This one's from Phoebe. Do you see any value in small community events, 20 women, for example, with wine and cheese and a quick educational blurb on the ways cannabis can help as a means to learn about that kind of curious customer base that we're so curious about? Any innovative ways like these kinds of experiential marketing methods that you've heard of the companies learning about the kind of curious category? This is for everybody.
To me, that sounds like ethnographic research. I worked on a women's deodorant brand earlier in my career, and I spent a week traveling to people's houses to talk to them about their lives, and then to look around their homes a little bit as they're talking to us about their lives, and then end up in their bathroom and then be like, let me see what kind of deodorants do you guys use, and then talk about those. And it's kind of weird the first time you're doing it, but you really, like, to the point of like trying to know an exact person, you're starting at the person and then trying to sort of back out into the data points to take away from that. But I think the only watch out is the smaller the group is, sort of the less you can sort of extrapolate that to an entire population. So you get nice little nuggets, but you have to, you're going to want to verify those and find those nuggets coming up again before you make it sort of a blanket understanding.
Yeah, and I just build on that again by saying that qualitative piece we think is really important. Often finding a data point and seeing the trend tells you sometimes the behavior, but it can't always tell you the intent or the why or the motivation behind it. So taking that and then interrogating the data with real people to understand sort of, okay, we see you demonstrating this certain behavior, but why are you doing it when you do it? And why do you do it there? And I'd also add, in our current circumstances, sort of that focus group or in-home ethnography is a more difficult task, but there's been so many advances, I think, in capturing some of that qualitative in a real one-to-one way through different messaging services, different methodologies to survey on a smaller scale. So you can get to some of that why behind the what.
Chris Rooney, anything to add?
They nailed it. for me at least. I'm a big proponent of qualitative research. I think it helps you uncover that last why, because data can help pinpoint you to the right direction and get you pretty far down. But it goes back to Jake's point when he was talking about that example today about the 21 plus adult female anxiety issues, but let's get under anxiety. You really can't do that. So it takes having an in-depth conversation with a group of folks that have this opportunity they're trying to solve to really get under why. And I think qualitative is a great place to do it.
I think that's why our community is so incredibly important to us, because we look at our customers as community members and try to build one-to-one relationships with all of them through email and also through our site. Like we have our Ask the Bud Tender Kayla, which is a chat pop up on our site. And so every single conversation feels two-way, where we're learning from them as much as they're learning from us in order to make a purchase decision. And why I said a little bit ago, like we really aim to cater to a psychographic and then use quantitative data to back up who that psychographic is and what their preferences are and what, areas we lean into when it comes to product development and education.
Awesome. All great points. And I could tell you from Arcview's experience, back when we did used to do our private investor conferences, 300 to 500 people, it was just through those conversations at those meetings that we learned what the cannabis investor was looking for, what the cannabis entrepreneur was looking for in our partners. So definitely that qualitative piece, super important. Last question before we close out today, and we'll go in reverse order this time. So starting from Varuni, what sort of partners and opportunities are you looking for, and how would people contact you?
My email is Varuni at Miss Grass, VARUNI at missgrass.com. I don't think I'll regret that. Email me, whatever you have, whatever question you have, email me. Or as it relates to connections and partnerships, or what are we looking for? I mean, our biggest goal, as I said, is to just help the world get good at weed and make cannabis accessible. And so anything relating to partnerships or content we can develop together, or, if you want to be a part of the survey that Chris and I are now going to collab on, or, if you want Miss Grass in your closest dispensary and we're not in there, hit me up about that. If there's a brand partner or a person who's a major advocate for cannabis that you think we should work with, let us know, as well as organizations to support how we can help all ships rise in this industry overall. And as it relates to data, if you can solve our data gaps, then come out of the woodwork and show yourself. But yeah, I mean, anything. I lead marketing, performance, and data. So those three things keep me up at night. And if you want to chat about any of that, I'm here.
Thank you, Bernie. Chris? What sort of partners are you looking for?
So we're going to blast email addresses. Mine is chris.rivera@crestskilllabs.com. Chris is spelled CRIS. No H in my name. At Sunnyside, as we expand from 5 to 7 states in 2020, I'm constantly looking for
Cliffhanger.
Line up well from right? Can you guys hear me?
You cut out.
Just got you back. Yep.
Oh,
so looking for right as you were saying what you're looking for.
Brands that want to do content partnerships that make sense for our brand, really focus on trying to bring the Canna Curious into cannabis, like Miss Grass. I'm really looking for partners outside of the THC products we sell through, regulated means. We also are trying to build our accessory business. So I'm looking for folks that have knowledge and interest in selling their products at our store. We're really excited to grow that portion of our business out. And third but not least, as we continue to be a good community member in the places we sell, sponsorships, events, places where we can get our word out to folks about what Sunnyside is and how cannabis can impact and be a part of one's life are definitely of interest to us as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Allison and Jake, partners you're looking for, opportunities, and how do people get a hold of you?
Well, as it pertains to data, as we mentioned, we know that there's so much changing in the way that we can collect data and our access to people and learning more from them. So if you're on the frontier of a new method, or if you're increasing your market coverage in cannabis, or you've got a new tool to share, hit us up for sure. We're always out there listening for new ways to get in touch with customers and understand them better. And my email address is also Allison, Allison, at receptorbrands.com. Feel free to reach out to us if you have other thoughts and ideas on this subject or others related to customer strategy. And also, if you are just kind of starting on your data discovery, obviously you've seen some of the tools and things that we use here and some of the resources that are accessible to us, and we're always happy to help.
I don't know what to add to that, Allison. I mean, if you want to do cool shit in cannabis, we're bringing some secret tricks from agency land over here because we think the opportunity is more interesting. And if you're into that, if you're not afraid to doing hard work to make cool shit happen, hit us up. And I'm Jake at receptorbrands.com.
Right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Jake, Allison, Chris, Varuni. Again, I learned so much. I'm sure our audience did as well. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thanks
You.
for joining.
Good job.
Now, those listening in, please don't leave just yet. You should be seeing a poll on your screen. So please take a moment to fill that out. We just talked about data, and we're data-driven over here too. And not only is this poll an opportunity for you to connect with the panelists that you heard from today, just in case you couldn't grab those emails, but it lets us know how valuable you found these webinars, what sort of services you're interested when it comes to cannabis, and at Arcview, cannabis-related services here at Arcview, but also events. I mentioned those investor conferences. We want to get back to that. And we really rely on your input on how you feel personally on when you feel comfortable going to a larger gathering like that. And while you're filling that out, I'd also like to talk about some of Arcview services and some of our upcoming webinars as well. I heard some chatter in the chat about how much people have been enjoying these webinars. That's great feedback. Thank you. Well, let's talk about our ecosystem a little bit. The Arcview has so many different arms to our business. The Arcview group has so many different arms to our business. I'll start over here on the left with Arcview Ventures. We are really known for capital services, including venture investing, and we formalize that under the Arcview Ventures arm. It's a member-managed fund where investors pool their resources and capital together to invest in early-stage cannabis businesses. We also have Arcview Capital, which handles transactions more related to crowdfunding, but also larger raises like Series B plus, or even going public as well. That's a FINRA registered broker dealer. We're really excited to have launched that in the last year as well. So if that's more within your realm and you're looking to raise capital in that type of space, let us know too. We also have the Women's Inclusion Network, where we empower women in the cannabis industry, cannabis and hemp, I should say, and really help them with their career development, thought leadership. We just had State Controller Betty Yee, for example, on one of our recent webinars, talking about female leadership in just overall her career development, but also her thoughts as it relates to cannabis as well. Arcview is also well known for our market research. It's the #1 cited source of market research in the space, one of the oldest publications. It's in its 8th edition right now, and copies are still available if you're looking for larger scale industry-wide data, since that's relevant to our topic here today too. Last but not least, Arcview Management Consulting. If you're looking for help with business development or how to even get into the space, if you are from more traditional industries and looking to get into cannabis, or if you're already in cannabis and there's this looming question about how to get ready for potential federal legalization, we have a whole program around that as well as around environmental sustainability and ESG. So in the survey, you can mark interest there as well if you're interested in learning more about Arcview Management Consulting. a couple of the webinars that we have coming up. We have Pitching Your Cannabis Startup in conjunction with Founder Institute. That's going on next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We also have our signature series of Arcview Access webinars with the future of sustainable hemp. That's going on next Thursday, the 25th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. It's not 10 a.m., but our email communications and our website will reflect as such. And really exploring how hemp can be used, not just for CBD, although that's a very interesting space as well, but also how it can be used in a sustainable way. Everything from fiber to plastics for the housing materials, clean energy. That's going to be a really interesting discussion that we're going to have next Thursday. Also related to hemp, we're teaming up with Ag Eagle to put on a 2-hour webinar with various state regulators, about 4 of them actually from all around the United States, to really hear their perspective on how they're regulating hemp at that state level. That's going on March 4th at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and that'll be for a couple of hours. You can learn about the rest of our programs. There's so much more that I could talk about at arcviewaccess.com, and all of our events will be listed there. But thank you so much for your time, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Thank you so much.